You're scrolling through crypto Twitter at 2 a.m., drinking your third energy drink, watching some 19-year-old with a laser-eyed profile picture brag about turning $500 into $50,000 on a coin called Baby Shark Moon. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is sitting at $74,000, and you're doing the same mental math everyone does. At $74,000 per coin, you could afford 0.0067 Bitcoin with your savings. 0.006. That number feels like failure. So you start scrolling for something cheaper, something you can actually own thousands of, convincing yourself that this is how you catch up. You're about to make the same mistake millions of people make, and it's going to cost you everything. Because here's what nobody tells you. The goal isn't one full Bitcoin anymore. That ship didn't just sail. It left the harbor, crossed the ocean, and colonized a new continent. But 0.1 Bitcoin, that's the actual threshold that changes everything. Not because it'll make you rich tomorrow, but because of what happens to your brain, your behavior, and your future the moment you cross it. My name is Nick, and today we're going to talk about why holding 0.1 Bitcoin puts you in the top 1% of humans on Earth, and why most people will never get there because they're too busy gambling on digital lottery tickets. Let's start with the psychological trap that keeps everyone broke. It's called unit bias, and it's the reason you'd rather own 10,000 of something worthless than 0.1 of something valuable. Your brain sees Bitcoin at $68,000 per coin and immediately does the math. You've got maybe $500 to invest. That gets you 0.0073 Bitcoin. Your brain hates that number. It feels incomplete, insufficient, embarrassing. Meanwhile, you can take that same $500 and buy 166,666 Shiba Moon rocket tokens, and suddenly you feel like a whale. You own 6 figures worth of something, and never mind that it's worth $500, your brain just sees the big number and feels satisfied. This is the gambler's trap, and it's not an accident. It's evolutionary psychology being exploited by people who understand human behavior better than you understand yourself. So instead, you buy meme coins. You buy coins that crypto influencers chill with rocket emojis and promises of 100 times gains. You buy coins because they're cheap and you can own a lot of them, and then you watch 90% of your investment evaporate when the inevitable rug pull happens or the hype dies or someone dumps their bags. And here's the brutal truth. Over a full market cycle, 95% of altcoins underperform Bitcoin. They don't just underperform by a little, they get absolutely demolished. Many of them never recover from bear markets. They go to zero while you're still holding, wondering when the pump is coming back. Gene Simmons from Kiss, a man who once sold Kiss-branded coffins so fans could be buried as walking advertisements, publicly explained why he bought millions of Dogecoin instead of Bitcoin. His reason? He could own more of them. A rock star worth $400 million fell for unit bias. If he can fall for it, you definitely can. Bitcoin, for all its volatility, has recovered from every single crash in its 16-year history. Every single one. Meanwhile, how many meme coins from 2021 are still around? How many of them recovered their all-time highs? I'll wait. Let me tell you about Alex, not a real person, but a composite of about 50 people I've watched make the same mistakes. Alex had $5,000 saved in January 2024. Bitcoin was at $43,000. He could have bought 0.116 Bitcoin. Instead, he bought 2 million tokens of something called Peppy Baby Doge because it was only 2 cents per token, and he liked feeling like a whale. By March, his 2 million tokens were worth $380. His whale position evaporated. Meanwhile, that 0.116 Bitcoin would have been worth $14,600 at the October 2025 peak. Alex is now trying to accumulate 0.1 Bitcoin at $74,000, which cost him $7,400, significantly more than his original $5,000. This is what unit bias costs you, not just money, time. Now let's talk about the math that should terrify you into action. There are 21 million Bitcoin. That number is hard-coded into the protocol. We've already mined about 19.85 million of them. That leaves roughly 1.15 million left to create over the next 100 years. Right now, only 450 new Bitcoin are created per day. In 2028, that drops to 225 per day. This isn't speculation, this is math. But here's where it gets really interesting. Of those 21 million Bitcoin, somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million are gone forever. Lost, irretrievable. James Howells has 8,000 Bitcoin, worth about $549 million, sitting in a Welsh landfill under 110,000 tons of garbage. Stefan Thomas has 7,002 Bitcoin locked behind a password he forgot. That's $480 million. He's used 8 of his 10 password attempts. He has 2 guesses left before it's gone forever. Imagine lying awake at night knowing that the difference between generational wealth and nothing is 2 passwords you can't remember. That's not a nightmare. That's just Tuesday for Stefan Thomas. So the actual circulating supply of Bitcoin is somewhere between 16 and 17.5 million coins. There are 8 billion people on Earth. Divide 17 million Bitcoin by 8 billion people, and you get 0.002125 Bitcoin per person. That's $157 at current prices. Owning 0.1 Bitcoin means you hold 47 times more than the average human could ever have. You're in a mathematically exclusive club. Here's what most people don't understand about this moment in history. By early 2026, BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF had accumulated over 600,000 Bitcoin. That's more Bitcoin than most countries will ever own. MicroStrategy now owns 400,000 Bitcoin. That's nearly 2% of the total supply controlled by one company. When institutions accumulate, they remove supply from circulation. Every Bitcoin BlackRock buys is a Bitcoin that retail investors can't buy. And the average person is being priced out in real time. Here's something nobody wants to hear. You're probably already too late to get rich from Bitcoin. I'm sorry, that's not pessimism, that's math. The people who got rich bought at $100, $1,000, maybe $10,000. You're buying at $68,000 after BlackRock validated it, after countries started stacking it, after it became safe. But here's what you're not too late for. Being positioned, being in the top 1%, having an asset that governments can't print. And in a world where inflation is the default and your savings account pays 0.5% while prices rise 6%, not getting poor might be the best victory available. Let me show you what 0.1 Bitcoin could become. ARK Invest's bear case for 2030 is roughly $500,000 per Bitcoin. Their bull case is significantly higher. If Bitcoin hits $500,000, your 0.1 Bitcoin is worth $50,000. If it hits $1 million, you've got $100,000. Even if they're all wrong and Bitcoin only hits $250,000, your 0.1 Bitcoin is worth $25,000. That's not generational wealth, but it's not nothing. And here's the thing that should haunt every person who says they missed Bitcoin. $10,000 invested in Bitcoin in 2015 is worth $2.5 million today. The same $10,000 in the S&P 500 is worth $27,000. Bitcoin has been profitable on 87% of all trading days in its history if you just bought and held. People lose money on Bitcoin for one reason: they sell when it's down. So why does 0.1 Bitcoin matter? Because of what happens to you psychologically the moment you own it. The second you have skin in the game, your entire relationship with money changes. You start paying attention to inflation rates, Federal Reserve policy, monetary supply. The Cantillon effect, which is the concept that the people closest to money creation benefit first, while everyone else gets screwed by inflation later. You stop spending money on stupid things because every purchase has an opportunity cost now. That $200 dinner, that could have been 0.003 Bitcoin. This is about developing low time preference, which means you start valuing future outcomes more than immediate gratification. You start thinking in decades instead of days. Remember Alex? Let's say he learned his lesson. He starts dollar cost averaging $100 per week into Bitcoin. At first, he checks the price 17 times a day, then something shifts. Around week 8, he stops checking. He realizes the number going up and down doesn't matter because he's buying anyway. By week 12, he started evaluating every purchase differently. That $80 Uber Eats order, that's 0.0012 Bitcoin. He's not miserable. He's just awake. People talk about Bitcoin changing their lives, and they don't mean the price. They mean the shift in mindset. There was a teacher who bought Bitcoin, and over time, he developed this habit of evaluating every expense against Bitcoin. He stopped going to concerts every summer. He stopped eating out 3 times a week. He automated buys of $100 per week. And after a few years, when his teaching job became unbearable, he could quit. He wasn't a millionaire, But he had enough breathing room to make a decision based on what was best for his life instead of what was necessary to survive. That's what Bitcoin does. It gives you options. Now, let's talk about how to actually get to 0.1 Bitcoin, because at $68,500 per coin, 0.1 Bitcoin costs about $6,850. That's not pocket change for most people, but here's the thing. You don't need to buy it all at once. This is where dollar cost averaging comes in, and it's the only strategy that actually works for normal people. You set up automatic purchases of Bitcoin on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for an amount you can afford. $50 a week, $100 a week, $200 a week, whatever fits your budget. Here's what the journey actually looks like. Week 1. You set up an account on River or Strike. You buy your first $100 of Bitcoin. You feel smart. Week 4, Bitcoin drops 8%. You feel stupid. Week 12, you've bought through the dip. Your average cost is lower than week 1. You start understanding what DCA means. Week 26, you stop checking the price daily. The $100 just leaves your account automatically every Friday. Week 40, you pass 0.05 Bitcoin, halfway there. For week 52, you hit 0.1 Bitcoin. You spent $5,200. Bitcoin's at $75,000, so your stack is worth $7,500. But here's what really happened. You built a habit. You proved you can be consistent. You stopped making emotional decisions about money. That's the real win. Here's what you need to do this right. First, pick an exchange with low fees. River, Strike, and Swan Bitcoin are good for dollar cost averaging. Coinbase works too, but their fees are higher. The key is to automate it so you're not making emotional decisions every week. Second, once you accumulate a meaningful amount, get it off the exchange, not your keys, not your coins. This phrase exists because of Mt. Gox and FTX. Exchanges are not banks. If they go under, your Bitcoin is gone. You need a hardware wallet, Ledger, Trezor, or Cold Card. These cost $100 to $250, and they're worth every penny. The trade-off. If you lose your seed phrase, your Bitcoin is gone forever. There is no customer service. This is the price of sovereignty. Third, understand the tax implications. The IRS treats Bitcoin as property. Buying and holding is not taxable. Selling triggers capital gains taxes. If you hold for over a year, you pay long-term capital gains rates, which are 0%, 15%, or 20% depending on your income. Consider a Bitcoin IRA through Swan or Unchained. You get tax-free growth if it's a Roth. Now let me tell you the risks, because if you're going to do this, you need to go in with open eyes. Let's talk about what it actually feels like when Bitcoin crashes 40% in 4 months. Let's say you bought the hype at $125,000 in October 2025. Your 0.1 Bitcoin cost you $12,500. Today, in February 2026, with Bitcoin correcting to $74,000, your stack is worth $7,400. You just watched $5,100 evaporate. That's a used car. That's a semester of college. And it happened while you were just living your life, going to work, making coffee, existing. You didn't do anything wrong. The market just decided your money was worth half today. Now you're lying in bed at 3 a.m. wondering if you should cut your losses and sell, or if holding makes you a stubborn idiot. This is the test. This is where most people fail. Not because they're dumb, but because watching money disappear is psychologically unbearable. If you can't stomach watching your investment drop 50% without selling, you shouldn't be in Bitcoin. This is not a savings account. This is a volatile, speculative asset that could make you a lot of money, or could sit underwater for 2 years while you wait for the next cycle. The people who make money in Bitcoin are the ones who can hold through the crashes, and that's harder than it sounds when you're watching your net worth evaporate in real time. Let me also be clear about something. Bitcoin is not digital gold yet. That's the narrative, but the reality is that Bitcoin currently trades like a high beta tech stock. Its 30-day correlation with the tech software ETF hit 0.73 in February 2026. When the stock market dumps, Bitcoin dumps harder. When the NASDAQ rallies, Bitcoin rallies harder. Until that changes, Bitcoin is not a hedge against anything except your own ability to hold through volatility. There's also the quantum computing risk right now. Quantum computers are nowhere near strong enough to break Bitcoin's encryption, But 20% to 50% of circulating Bitcoin sits in addresses with exposed public keys, which means if quantum computing advances faster than expected, those coins are vulnerable. Bitcoin's protocol can be upgraded to be quantum resistant, but upgrades take years to coordinate and implement. The risk is low, but it's not zero. And then there's Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the guy who wrote The Black Swan, who used to be pro-Bitcoin and even wrote the foreword to the Bitcoin Standard. He reversed his position completely in 2021. His argument is simple. Bitcoin generates no cash flows, no dividends, no income. It's purely a speculative asset. And if there's any probability, however small, that it goes to zero, then its rational expected value is zero. He calls it an open Ponzi scheme. Now, I don't agree with him, but his critique deserves respect. If you're putting 100% of your net worth into Bitcoin, you're gambling, not investing. Here's what I think the right approach looks like. You cover your basic needs first. Stable income, emergency fund, pay off high-interest debt. You don't invest in Bitcoin with money you need in the next 2 years. You automate small, consistent purchases. You ignore the daily price swings. You get to 0.1 Bitcoin over time, and then you hold. You don't check the price every day. You don't panic sell during crashes. You just hold. Fast forward 18 months. Alex hit 0.1 Bitcoin. He spent $7,800 total buying through ups and downs. Bitcoin's at $74,000. So his 0.1 is worth $7,400. He's technically down $400. Here's what changed. He has $4,000 in an emergency fund he didn't have before. And here's the hardest part. When you finally hit 0.1 Bitcoin, you're going to be tempted to cash out. Maybe Bitcoin runs to $150,000 and your 0.1 is worth $15,000. That's a used car. That's a down payment on something. That's a vacation. And you'll start thinking, maybe I should take some profits. Maybe I should lock in the gains. And that's the moment where most people lose, because if you sell, you're back to zero. You're back to trying to accumulate. You're back to unit bias, looking at the price and thinking you missed it again. Remember when we started, you were scrolling through crypto Twitter at 2 a.m., looking at meme coins, feeling like you missed Bitcoin. Now you know that was unit bias talking. When the goal was never 1 Bitcoin, it was 0.1 Bitcoin. And unlike that kid bragging about Baby Shark Moon, you'll still have your money in 5 years. The smart play is to view 0.1 Bitcoin as something you never sell. It's not an investment. It's a savings account that inflation can't touch. It's insurance against monetary instability. It's a hedge against government incompetence. It's the asset you pass down to your kids. 1 Bitcoin is for institutions and governments. 0.1 Bitcoin is for the smart middle class. It's for people who understand that the game is rigged, that inflation is a hidden tax, that the money printing will never stop, and that you need something outside the system. Here's the question you need to ask yourself, and you need to be honest about the answer. 5 years from now, what will bother you more? Buying 0.1 Bitcoin and watching it go down before it goes up? Or not buying it at all and watching other people cross a threshold you'll never reach because you were too busy chasing coins named after dog memes? The wealth illusion is real. Owning 0.1 Bitcoin won't make you rich tomorrow. It won't pay off your house or buy you a Tesla. What it will do is put you in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders on Earth. It'll change how you think about money. It'll force you to develop discipline. It'll give you optionality when the system continues doing what systems do. Inflating, debasing, and punishing savers. 1 Bitcoin is for institutions and governments. 0.1 Bitcoin is for people who understand that the game is rigged but refuse to play the victim. The question isn't whether Bitcoin will go up. The question is whether you'll be holding it when it does. Most people won't. And that's exactly why it matters if you do.